I don't think that someone should ever train for a marathon in a 16-week block without having a base level of fitness and a base level of strength. So strength training helps build capacity in the tissues, the muscles, the tendons, your joints, your bones, and it will help improve the shock absorption and sort of power and strength to the running. It's kind of been made that you must have a carbon shoe, you must have an easy running shoe, you must have a long run shoe. For the general population, like, that's not going to be the case at all. I'm Tash. I am a physio, and I work in sort of central London, Chelsea, as well as the city. I freelance, so I specialise in MSK and orthopaedics, but also have a special interest in teaching, like treating runners. So that is really my kind of area I've kind of gone down. I started off down in Tunbridge Wells, and I did a couple of years at a place called the Horder Centre, and then I worked rugby for a bit, and then moved to London after COVID, and then worked in a few of the big private hospitals. So one was Sheppard, and then I was at Fortius for a bit, and then also HCA. So I really did try them all. And then realised that actually I could probably go and do this by myself. So I am self-employed, and have been very fortunate to create like a close-knit consultant referral group that's really kind of kept me going and kind of opened a lot of doors for my career, which is really nice. I personally run, but a little bit about my kind of like sporting background. I was quite sporty when I was little, and I knew I couldn't sit at a desk, hence why I went into physio. That was not for me. I always knew that wasn't for me. I was the kind of the kid that was the one at the sporting tournament rather than sitting in the classroom. But so I was a sports scholar, but my main sport ultimately was hockey. I played Premier League for a little bit in that, and then I went off into the ski season. So yeah, I love sport, every type of sport, which has become very handy as a physio because I can rehab most sports. But I was always running as a child as well. So I did, it's called tetrathlon, which is like running,
Yeah.
shooting, riding, and swimming.
I know, and I know normally when you say that you did tetrathlons, people,
And I
they
was like,
won't know
what's
what it
that?
is. But I actually did tetrathlon too.
And yeah, we have horses at home, which is very fortunate. I grew up on a farm down in Kent, so that is really, really nice. So yeah, I've always had running in my background. I was the one that wanted to do the kind of cross country in the midwinter as a 7-year-old, but yeah, and then yeah, it kind of took my running career, like as everyone did, a little bit more seriously, or quite relaxed at the time, but during COVID, and then really found that actually like that gave me my mental release. And being a physio and you're helping people all day and you're dealing with pain or anyone else's pain all day, it can be quite stressful, but I love that part of the job. So that was kind of my like mental release, my mental fix, which I think a lot of people use running for anyway. And then I kind of found my love for that kind of half marathon distance. That's really my favorite. And people are quite surprised when I say I haven't run a marathon yet, but that's on the cards next year. Yeah, and then later on this year, I did a few trail runs and kind of was like, this is really up my street. I really love this. So, again, like I guess that comes from like coming from the countryside and getting out of London, which is really nice. But hopefully, I've covered most things. Oh, and I'm an identical twin, and I have an older sister. So that's about it, really.
I love that. That's like a little byline at the end of the blurb, isn't
She'll
it?
be upset if I don't mention her. Or both of them will.
In terms of the physio element of it, because
Yeah.
ultimately it's very obvious that you're a massive fan of sport, always have been
Yeah.
growing up. When did that first become a thing that you were interested in pursuing?
So when I was little, because I was a sports scholar, I would just thought like being a PE teacher was going to be the best thing ever, and being outside. And my mum's actually a physio, so she was like, you can absolutely be a PE teacher if that's what you want to do, but like I really recommend you go and do physio at uni. Like you can open up a lot more doors with that. You can still go down the teaching route if you want to. I was a nanny when I was younger, so when I was training as a physio, I was a nanny, and I just love that element of it and looking after kids, and like always been quite natural at that. But yeah, I guess the physio element kind of kick-started like being sporty, you're always going to be injured. So I was very fortunate. Mum would, take me up and do what she needed to do to make sure I was playing. But that kind of element, I love helping people and getting people back to what they love. And the physio kind of just made sense. And I could see how flexible the career could be, having obviously had mum as a physio as well. She did actually stop working for a period of time, then went back to it. And I always knew that MSK was because so MSK is like bones, muscles, and all of the kind of what we know physio as. There's lots of different other sections as physios. So respiratory, neuro, you can do community and X, Y, and Z. But I always knew I wanted to go down that sports element. So kind of against the grain, I guess, I went directly into MSK, which isn't necessarily the route that people advise you to do. They do advise you to go and do your like rotations and kind of find the area that you want to do. But I knew that that's the route I wanted to go down. And I guess in some respects it was a risk, but it has really accelerated my career to where I want to be. And kind of to counteract that, I went into rugby. So I did semi-pro rugby for about 3 years. And when I was training, used to go and watch this most amazing physio who's called Russ. I owe my whole career to him, and he really taught me everything. And I just used to sit and I watched, and that would be my biggest advice to any junior physio, is just go and watch any sport that you love, but rugby is particularly good because you can see all sorts.
Yeah.
And any injury. And I just watched and I sat and I did, and then suddenly I got the confidence to go and assess, and then I was treating, and then that's really how I got my kind of hands-on treatment skills. And I think particularly for junior physios, I'm going on a tangent now, but junior physios with the NHS particularly, they don't necessarily encourage hands-on physio, and for me that's like one of the biggest skills to treat. And physio, as most people know it, you go into a room, or you even have it online mostly these days, where you hear your exercises and come and see me in 6 weeks, and that's really not how I treat. And that kind of interaction, human interaction, that person coming back every couple of weeks or sometimes every week for a short period of time, and saying, I can now do this, is the most rewarding thing.
Do you think because there is obviously this huge passion for sport and a big love for
Yeah.
sport, do you think that makes it even more rewarding because you kind of know yourself how much that means to you, so you kind of
Yeah.
understand what it means to other people, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think like there's nothing worse, particularly for runners, to be like, you shouldn't run. So like that feeling, and actually like personally going through that at the moment, like I've really I'm trying to be the very good patient. And there's nothing worse than a runner being told, we heavily advise you not to run at this moment in time. Or any sport, a lot of people use exercise as that kind of mental and physical release. And um there's nothing better than, for me, when I was playing high level hockey, like standing on the pitch and playing what I love, and just having 60 minutes of actually just not focusing on anything else in your life, just putting your whole into that game and making sure you're that run, that you are doing everything you can do and you are doing what you love. So I think, yeah, for me, like the biggest thing, I've had like multiple patients actually over the last couple of days been texted being like, or emailed being like, I've completed my couch 5K, or like I'm back running with no pain. Like that is the most rewarding thing. And like from an emotional, like how much I put into my work, I think it's quite difficult to find a physio that genuinely cares about your journey. And that's what I try to do about for everyone. Because if you're going into an appointment or a consultation and you can kind of see that physio is distracted, or wherever you are, and they're not buying into your journey, then you're in the wrong room and you're in the wrong door. And that, I think that's crucial to get right as a physio, but in any healthcare profession as well. So yeah, definitely that's why I think it's really important to kind of be on that journey with them as well.
You touched on your own injury there. What are you like as a patient? Are you good at following your own advice, or are you kind of a do as I say and not as I do type person?
No, I do actually really try to kind of practice what I preach. I think it's quite important. I think it's quite difficult, particularly as physios. Like I laugh with one of the consultants that I work with quite closely, and he's like, "Physio's always the worst patients." But actually, we, I I probably wasn't a very good patient, and actually I can hold my hands up, and I wasn't a very good patient at the beginning of the year, which like ultimately has led to my running journey this year not being how I wanted it to be. But it got to a point where you're kind of, I took a step back and I was like, I'm fixing nearly everyone else and I'm not fixing myself. And the priority is slightly shifted now to that. And yeah, the problem is when you're seeing runners in sports professions or, that kind of group of clients or patients, I am constantly jumping in the gym, showing them how to do a drop jump or a pogo. And, my knee injury was not ready to do that. So it is quite difficult to manage. I can easily cycle 30 to 40 kilometers in a day for my home visits. So that, the volume of exercise that I'm doing just to see people and do my job is quite difficult to manage when you're injured. And yeah, I think it is quite difficult, but from the last kind of 2 months, I've really kind of had a bit of a reset and been like, "I need to get this right, otherwise I'm not gonna be able to continue to doing what I love, but also my job properly." And it is quite difficult as a physio to kind of I was actually having this conversation with my housemate last night because when you go to a physio, you don't really want to go to the injured physio. That can be as a physio, I was almost, uh, I very much come to terms with it now, but almost embarrassed that I was injured because we should be doing everything right. But there is, injuries happen and, tissue capacity and loading capacity. There are some points where your body just goes, I've had enough. And actually, the one thing I can step back with and reflect on that is, mine was an ITB injury that is that 80% of runners can get ITB injuries, and that's a lot of my caseload. So I can really now relate to my patients that if you stop running in this stage 1, stage 2, you will get out of stage 1 and stage 2 much quicker. And there is an element where I can then use my personal experience to really kind of hone in on the fact that if you keep running, you are not going to get back to running quicker. And that's been really helpful. So yeah, injuries aren't necessarily a bad thing. I think they teach you a lot, but yeah, I struggle to come to terms with the fact that people were coming to me for advice and I was injured. But I've now really used it and turned it around as a positive, and kind of being the patient and doing what I say and practice what I preach has been quite difficult, like, I'm not gonna lie, that's, hard, but, there was multiple races, even over the last couple of weeks where I've had to be like, "I can't run," and I've been asked by brands to run, and I can't run, and I would love to stand on that start line, but that's gonna put me back another month. So, yeah, I think it is very difficult, but I've really taken a step back over the last couple of months and been like, I need to do this properly. Otherwise, next year's going to be a repeat of this year and I'm not going to enjoy it. So, yeah, I think that's crucial.
That decision to take yourself out of something is so hard, isn't it?
Yeah,
When
yeah,
especially, when you're asked or there are opportunities that arise. And look, even if you've just had something in the diary for a little bit of time and that's it you're
yeah,
aiming towards, having to make that decision to step out and not do it,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
so difficult.
So difficult. And I think, I did at that point have to be like, what would I advise my patients to do? And I would advise my patient not to run. That's what I did. And yeah, it is hard because you feel like you're letting people down and, it's a very good opportunity. It could open some more doors, but at the end of the day, your health is the most important thing. And if you're going to cause further damage, then what's the point? And that I think a lot of people, even in the kind of social media space, are kind of seeing that at the moment. There's a lot of people that have been running for 2 or 3 years, and volume has caught up on them, and now we're finding that injury it has massively increased. And yeah, it's important to look after yourself, and we aren't bulletproof. um, and things do go wrong. But if you respect that initial stages, you're much more likely to get back quicker.
I think social media is incredibly powerful and it's been such a tool in like the explosion of running in the last kind
Yeah.
of few years. However, it does feel like sometimes there is this sort of feeling of instant gratification. It's like, I want to
Mm.
do this right now. And you kind of see that with people stepping up to the marathon. Like you said, like you haven't run a marathon quite yet, but you've
Yeah.
been this person for, your whole life. You've always
Yeah.
been sporty. And when you
Yeah.
do run that marathon, your body's going to be in a position where it's going to be able to cope with that marathon. Sometimes
Yeah.
you're seeing people that are coming in and have just started running in COVID, and now we're 3 or 4 marathons deep.
Yeah.
And it's like, there needs to be that process between starting and getting to that point.
Absolutely.
It in some cases seems too fast.
I think it's exactly that. And I actually had a patient a couple of months ago, and they came in and I said, "So what's your injury?" 'Cause, I treat injured people all day, and they were like, "I'm not injured." And I was like, "Okay, so why are you here?" And they were like, "I'm doing London Marathon next year, and I know I can run 5, 10K quite comfortably, but I don't strength train. I have never run further than 15K, and I want a plan." And that is my favorite type of person to see, because they've already foreseen that they need to be doing some strength training, but they don't know where to start. And people that are training for London Marathon now should be well deep into their strength training plan and building up a base before they start their 16 to 18 block. I don't think that someone should ever train for a marathon in a 16-week block without having a base level of fitness and a base level of strength. And I think we're finding that more and more, is that strength training, this kind of social media element, is like, oh, you can run a marathon, but like no one's homing in on the strength training section of running, and it is crucial to prevent injuries. And that's really what I try and get across with my page. Is it's an education page. It's making strength training accessible for people that don't necessarily have access to gyms. And, there's so much that you can do at home that can prevent you from getting injured, and help you build that base level of fitness and that understanding before you go into a longer distance program. And I think it is all catching up with people now, and people are becoming a little bit more aware of it. But if you're running 3 times a week, you should be in the gym twice a week at least. And that is definitely something that's changing, but it's amazing how many people aren't still doing it.
To the layman, what does strength training do for somebody that is a runner? Because you see everywhere, don't you? All runners should be strength training. You've just said if you're running 3 times a week, you should be in the gym
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah. So strength training helps build capacity in the tissues, the muscles, the tendons, your joints, your bones. And it will help improve the shock absorption and sort of power and strength to the running. So take the calf complex, for instance. So you've got 2 main muscles in the calf, but there are a lot of other intrinsic muscles around the foot and ankle that help with this. But there's a lot of studies to suggest that kind of the calf complex itself will take up to kind of 5 to 8 times your body weight when you're running. And if you're continuously running, like, running is a element of strength training, but you have to build capacity. So it's like, I always say, like, explain to my patients, it's like having a cup of water. And if your cup of water is half empty, you can build up to that. But if your cup of water is full and you spill over, that's when the injuries happen. So you want to keep making your cup of water larger, if that makes sense. So you can constantly build the volume without overspilling. And that is crucial, because if you don't, then that's when you're going to have like tendon injuries and, ligament strains, and your body will start to give up on you. And it doesn't need to be complicated. I think I had a patient last night, and I was actually a home visit, and he was like, and I was showing him some very basic exercises like bridging and side steps of the band and some gluteal kind of posterior strength training, so the back of the leg, calf raises. And he was like, "Oh, so that's strength training." And he was like, "I thought I had to be in the gym and I had to be lifting really heavy weights." And I was like, we do want to go into progressive overload, and we do want to ultimately, hold some hand weights, but you don't need to be lifting double your body weight at the beginning stages of strength training. We do, leg press, for instance. We strive for runners to be able to do like body weight and a half single leg press, but you're not going to start there. You're going to start at 40 to 60% and build yourself up. And it takes 6 months to get to that kind of strength. But I think it's overcomplicated. And, I see all sorts of videos on Instagram, like, bend over backwards and turn your head and then turn your knee, and this is a good stretch to do. And you're like, I don't even know how you've got into that position. So for me, the most basic is the best. And I really try to get that across on my page, is that, I can start talking about X, Y, and Z muscle, but I've lost everyone on the first sentence. So very basic, very simple tips that the layman can understand is really, it doesn't have to be complicated, and it's crucial to reduce injury risk.
Day to day, I'm a radio presenter, and I listen to radio and I analyze it. Like, I just can't listen to it and be a listener.
Yeah.
When you're running, with groups, when you're running in a race, is there ever a time where you're looking at people, looking at people's gait, looking at people's style, and you're like analyzing that, thinking, "Oh, I wish I could just tell this person there's these little changes that could maybe help them."
Yeah, I mean, it is very difficult as a physio. I think my whole family laugh, and particularly because my mum's a physio. I mean, we just talk about physio all day at dinner, and my family are like, "Oh my gosh, can you please stop?" Um, but yeah, I mean, I will watch people run down the road, and I'm like, "Oh, you're in the wrong trainers," or whatever. But I really try not to get involved, because at the end of the day, there is an element where you have to switch work off, and I'm very happy to give, some people some advice, but, if they wanna come and see me and they want my advice, they can come to clinic or they can have an appointment with me. And it is very difficult to switch that pattern off, and I think even people surrounding me, like my close friends and, my boyfriend, for instance, that we're running together, and he'll be like, "God, did you see what they're doing?" And I'm like, "Okay, let's just leave that one alone." But yeah, so I think it is difficult to not get involved, but there is an element where, if I was an office worker, I'd be leaving my laptop at work, and there is a point where sometimes I just have to switch off and go, I'm in a class. For instance, I was in a Pilates class this morning, and I saw some quite interesting techniques, and actually that's not I'm a participant in the class. It's down to the instructor to sort that out, not me. So I'm quite good. I have learned to switch off from that. If I obviously see something dangerous, I might be like, please stop doing that. But yeah, I think it's quite crucial not to get too involved, but I will, if someone's asked for advice, I will give it to them.
You mentioned shoes just very briefly there. What what are your feelings towards shoes and kind of the marketability that has happened,
Yeah.
the, you know, rise of the carbon shoe? What
Yeah.
what do you feel as a physio towards kind of what people are putting on their feet at the moment?
Yeah. I think London's a bubble. I think that, it's kind of been made that you must have a carbon shoe, you must have an easy running shoe, you must have a long run shoe, you must have a speed shoe. Um, and for the general population, like, that's not going to be the case at all. I think that pronations with the movement of the inward rotation movement of the ankle and foot, is not a bad thing. However, if you're having recurrent injuries, it's definitely something that from a biomechanical point of view you should look into. And trainers are a minefield, and you're not going to get it right. That is why I say that to all my patients. The first time you buy your trainers are probably not going to be the right shoe for you. And that's an issue because it becomes expensive. So I always, when I have runners in, I will always do a gait analysis, and I will recommend them 5 pairs of shoes for them to go to the shop. And I always say go to a shop rather than buy online. Or if you're doing it online, buy 3 or 4 pairs. Again, it's expensive, but you're going to send 2 or 3 back. So you can't make a decision by just putting one shoe on your foot. And so I will give a list to my patients, having looked at them on the treadmill, taking their history of injury, their type of running that they want to do. And for instance, if you've got Achilles heel issues, you may want a slightly higher stack shoe with a bigger heel to toe drop versus like a knee and hip pain where you might want a less of a heel to toe drop. So there are so many factors to take into account. Also taking into account what are you running in at the moment, and you don't want a dramatic change from your shoe now. And this is where we're finding is an issue, because I know your Brooks Adrenalines that you got 3 years ago is not the same shoe as their Brooks Adrenalines today. And they're changing the spec of shoes so much that actually from one version to the next, that might not be the right shoe for you anymore. So it's an absolute minefield, but my biggest advice is go to a shop and try 5 pairs of shoes on. Run on the treadmill, run outside. There are plenty of shoe shops in London, Run and Become being one of them, like Runners Need. They're all really good. They've got some experts in the shop that are going to advise you, but I really try and give my patient like a ballpark of these are what I advise. Now go and try them, and you pick the most comfortable one. And it's not a cheap process, but having the right pair of shoes can reduce injury risk by over 100%. So it's crucial.
Does it feel different for you now? Because obviously what you do, even though you're in kind of a very individual job, the way you're speaking about kind of the community of maybe physios, let's say, it still feels like it's quite inclusive. Does it feel like that? Is it almost like a team sport?
Oh, it absolutely is. And I've been very fortunate to find a clinic that we are all self-employed, but we are a team. So we all run our own clinic, we all run our own diary. But if I have a problem or a physio has a problem next door, we will literally knock on the door and open the door and be like, "What do you think?" And I advise to if anyone's in this industry, like find that environment. I spent 4 years finding that environment. There were, you've got to be that kind of, we are a group of people. I think physios, we're all actually quite similar in personalities. Like we all have that empathy. We want to help. We want to get people better, but we are all very much a team working kind of type of person. But people find it quite interesting when I say that, like, particularly MSK as a physio is a really isolating role. Because although, I mean, I can easily see 12 to 16 to 18 patients a day, and I'm seeing all of these people, but in some respects, it's like a conveyor belt. You're in and out and in and out and in and out, and you haven't necessarily socialized, you've just worked. And I think that it can be quite isolating. And I think that if you aren't in the right environment and you're sitting in your room, whether you've had a cancellation or you can't go and chat to your next door neighbour, can be really difficult. So finding the right environment it has been crucial for me. And I have been in some very uninspiring environments, and that didn't work for me. I knew where I wanted my career to go. And I've really tried to find that and make that for myself as well.
Is it difficult then when you do have something like, running taken away from you because you are currently injured to kind of deal with that? Because I would imagine, and you've actually already mentioned in this conversation, that you do use running as that escape. You do use it as that kind of that mental mindfulness that people talk about.
Yeah.
How do you switch off from work when you don't have the thing that maybe you use to switch off from work to switch off?
Yeah, it is difficult. I'm in clinic 60% of my time. I then do home visits on the side of that. I then run my social media. I then also have online clients. So, and then you've got constant email. So it is really difficult. I think the biggest thing for me is that I really make sure that I have something to look forward to, whether that's a holiday or a race or like whatever I want. I make sure that I take some like significant time off when so I have a really intense period of helping and working, and then I will have a week to 2 weeks up to 3 weeks off. And that has been crucial for me. When I went self-employed at the beginning of the year, I was like, I want to travel and I want to do more for just me rather than just constant career work. And it is difficult when you're running a social media on the back end because that feels like it never stops. Like there is a constant want to, but in some respects, because when I am on holiday, I'm not seeing clients. I find that kind of less of a burden. I find that easier to manage because, it will take me a couple of minutes to film some exercises and make the video. And then I really use that kind of schedule platform or on Instagram. So when it is made, it's all scheduled and I don't have to worry about the post goes up. And I'm at that point very easy to switch off from that. And because Instagram to me is very much a business, it's not like I very rarely will sit and scroll, as we can sometimes find ourselves doing. But for me, it's like, okay, like the workday's done now. I don't want to be on social media. I want to get off it. So in some respects, that's helped me as well.
I've spoke to a few like people in healthcare and physios over the years on the podcast and just in like everyday life as well, friends of mine. And
Yeah.
I think something you often see is people that do have those amazing traits of empathy, of wanting to help people, often want to help people so much they kind of forget that
Yeah.
themselves need a bit of a break, and you kind of need to help yourself as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you
No,
do you
massively.
do you feel like that? Do you have to remind yourself?
Yeah, no, there are times where I'm like, whoa, that was too much that day. I tried to fit in too much. To be honest, I had one of those days yesterday. I was like, that was a big day. Don't need to be doing that. Mm, but yeah, I think, we always try and fit people in. I had, someone that wanted to be seen urgently. So I then, took my hour and a half away from myself to put that patient in. And you have to be really careful about that. There has to be a boundary. And, when you're running your own business, you do put people first. And that can be really tricky. But I have like since stopping rugby, which was about 2 years ago, I really made sure I wasn't working on the weekends. So I really try and make my 2 days, like Saturday and Sunday, are my days. If I want to do social media, I can, but like I really try and do whatever I want to do, whether that's go for a run or go to the gym or whatever I need to do. I have 2 days to properly switch off. And then the way that I've scheduled my diary has really helped as well. So although it's busy at the moment, but I have Tuesday mornings off normally, hence why this slot was available. And that's kind of like my time where I'll go to like an exercise class or I'll go to the gym or I'll do my long run, like when I am running. So that like I really make sure like in the middle of the week I have like a time for me, and I don't work Friday afternoons. Like that is my time. I do what I want to do. Then if I did want to do some work, I can do it. But I know I have like buffers in the week that are mine, and no one's going to replace that unless I choose to replace that, if that makes sense.
And I think that's so important. There will be people listening to this that I'm sure have schedules that are a bit overwhelming at the moment.
Yeah.
It's that thing of being strict on yourself. Unless something comes up that you want to do, that's your time. You kind of
Yeah.
just have to do that and have that, because I guess without that time, maybe you're not going to be able to give your full self to the time that you're actually with clients, or you're actually
Massively.
working hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And no, and I think it's really crucial. Like when I was an employed physio, I was being made to see 16 to 18 patients a day. I was given 1 or 2 admin breaks a day, and that was it. Half an hour for lunch. If my last patient cancelled, I'd have to sit in the room until I left. And I was like, I'm not going to be a physio student if I carry on doing this. You have to find what works for you. And I think it's quite a scary step to go into that self-employed life. I've been very fortunate that that's paid off for me. But there is always that element of, if I don't see this person, I might not get a person next week. So, it might be worth financially for me to do that. And but like once you've done that, like I've obviously done that since the beginning of the year, and I've really settled into that. If someone's cancelled, I'm like, thank goodness. I'm like, I'm gonna go to the gym, or I'm gonna go and have a nap. Like I'm a hardcore napper sometimes. So like yeah, you relax into that. But I think definitely for the first 6 months you do have that slight like anxiety, is that I need that money coming in case I don't have that money next week, kind of thing. So yeah, it's crucial to get right, but you're not going to get it right straight away.
We mentioned the social account a couple of times. I'll put the link in the bio. I definitely implore everybody to go and follow that.
Thank you.
When did that first become a thing? Like, when did you first start sharing knowledge on socials?
I did. As everyone did, I started in lockdown, and I was living with my older sister, who was PT at the time, and I took quite like an executive decision to go down the education route. Like, it seemed apt for my career. And I kind of pride myself, like, whenever my friends are like, oh, it's an influencer, I'm like, I'm an educator. And like, no disrespect to anyone else, but like, I really try to make my page educational. Like, I want people to come to my page and be like, I've got knee pain, I've got an injury, how do I manage that? And I want to help people that of a similar age, but like my age demographic that I treat is from, younger than me to much older. So it really is for any type of runner. And I have really tried to kind of get across that it doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be complicated. Like, injury is simple as long as you get it right, and it's crucial to get the right advice. So it's very difficult to be quite generic on Instagram, which is why everything is quite basic on my page. I heavily advise if anyone is having an injury that you need to speak to a healthcare professional and get a personalized plan. But I was running London 10K on like earlier this year, and I overheard, it was quite funny, I overheard a girl be like, oh, I follow this girl on Instagram. She didn't know I was standing behind her. She was like, I was just like called Gale Physio. Like, she literally fixed my knee. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. And like, she was like, no way. Like, and she was so nice about it. But like, that's why I do it. And like, there is so much free advice on that page that, if I can help 1% of someone that comes across that and I get someone back to their running, what they want to be doing, like, that's why I do it. And it was just the nicest thing. Like, I didn't even care that I got a PB that day. I was like, this is great. This is why I do it. Like, that is so rewarding. And yeah, as long as we can help people, then that's really what I strive to do.
Obviously, you're going to get through this injury, and you've mentioned the marathon next year. I think this is probably a nice place to finish, actually, because you will have treated so many people over the years,
Yeah.
either on the lead up to a marathon, post a marathon, and now you're going to take that step and do that 26.2 yourself.
Yeah.
How do you hope to be feeling this time next year? Where are you running, and are you excited to get that under your belt?
I'm really excited. I think that, like, my running journey's taught me a lot. Like, I know that I don't necessarily tolerate the slightly longer distance very well. So this is hence why I'm doing like a big training, like strength training block to start at the end of this year to really build up to the mileage at kind of middle of next year. I haven't quite decided which marathon I want to do, but if my injury and my body allows me to do that, I absolutely will. I have also incorporated, and I have always done cycling and swimming. Like, I was in the swim squad when I was younger. So, like, kind of like a triathlon 70.3 would be really a goal, whether that's next year or the year after. I think when we're setting goals, and we're like, I want to do this, I want to do that, like, it's quite key not to kind of put too much on yourself. Like, I know that next year is going to be quite a big business year for me as well. And if I can't start saying, I'm going to do a marathon, I'm going to do a 70.3, I'm going to try and do this, I'm trying to get a 5k PB time, none of that's going to happen. Set one, and if you can achieve 3, then you're in a better position rather than achieving none. So yeah, I haven't quite decided what marathon I want to do. I'm potentially looking at Paris, but I haven't decided. And yeah, I think like triathlon for me, like from a longevity point of view, it really suits my body, like that lower impact cardio with the running as well. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited for next year.
And I think finally, because I want to touch on that quickly, you said it suits my body. And I think that's so important, isn't it? Because everyone is an individual. And I think sometimes that gets forgotten. Like, for me, my lifetime goal that I would love to run under 3 hours for a marathon, right? And that's been a lifetime goal for years for me. And I'm not there yet, but I feel like next year could potentially be the year because of what I've done up to this point. And sometimes you see people who go out and run their first marathon and they run a sub 3, and you're like, how has that happened?
And that's what the most frustrating thing is, isn't it? Yeah.
You're individual. And I think that's so important to remind people, isn't it?
No, definitely. And I think, like, absolutely use people as your inspiration, but your journey is your journey, and don't compare that to anyone else. And I think, when we've like lockdown runners right at the beginning, like, everyone was trying to get their first, like, the speediest 5k, and if you weren't running under 5-minute kilometers, everyone was like, oh, she's not very good. So Like, I think there has been a massive learning curve with running and, like, you know, heart rate running versus like perceived effort, and that kind of, I don't know, evil eye on running has settled, definitely, but you can't put your body through something it's not ready for. And yeah, I'm a big advocate for that. And yeah, you've got to find the right modalities that work for you, basically.